come out with this nonsense of whenever you mention the killing of the people in Gaza, they say, what about October the 7th? On October the 7th, the Israelis, when they say that there were 1,200 people were killed, the Israelis killed a significant proportion of those people killed on October the 7th were killed by the Israelis themselves, so that they would not, yes, by the Israelis themselves. It is extremely well documented. There are, you might remember, images of large numbers of cars, supposedly around the festival, that have been blown up by helicopter gunships. Hamas has no helicopter gunships. The Israelis, I say it slip of the tongue, the Americans, not that bad a slip of the tongue. The Israelis went in there and they just blew them up because they have this thing called the Hannibal Directive, which means if a Palestinian group captures an Israeli, you must kill the Israeli so they don't become hostages. And if you don't think that's true, well, look at the policy now. They don't want the hostages freed. They want to keep on fighting. There's something like, they reckon 24 hostages left. The Palestinians made a deal to hand over hostages for hostages. The Israelis released some hostages. By the way, there's no talk about how they became hostages. How comes there's so many thousands of Palestinians who are being released compared with Israelis being released? How the hell did they end up in prison indefinitely, without charge, without trial, many of them children and women? How many people, they talked about, you know, I remember Piers Morgan, they were killing babies. They put a baby in the oven, they said. A baby in the oven. They raped all these women. That's what they kept saying. Don't you remember when the Palestinians released as part of the hostage deal? Only a month or two ago, when they were being released, the Hamas fighters were there with their guns. And they had signs behind them. And then they would bring up soldiers, children, women onto the stage, and they'd be high-fiving with each other, right? The Palestinians who had captured these people high-fiving with the captives. The captives giving them a hug. One of the soldiers gave the hug to the Hamas fighters. So much for the animosity. They've obviously been treated as well as you could possibly imagine in a war zone where the Americans, the British and the Israelis have been slaughtering something like 50,000 people, of which some 2/3 are women and children. And then they said, what about the baby who was put in the oven? So one baby in an oven, which is a false story, compared with, let's say, 20,000 children blown up, heads knocked off, every single day on television. And no one gives a shit. Or better said, it looks like no one gives a shit. And then they're trying to create a cultural war around this issue because they know a large number of people in Britain and in Europe are saying, we're sick of all the Muslim immigrants. That's what they say. Subterraneously, that's what they're saying. We're sick of Muslim immigrants. A lot of them don't know who's a Muslim, who's not a Muslim. They don't know who comes from Indian subcontinent, who's a Hindu and who's a Muslim. They don't really understand much about Islam, except they have this idea that Islam equals terrorism, and Islam equals barbarity, Islam equals backwardness, and therefore they say these are subhuman. And when the Israeli minister turned round at the beginning of the attack on Gaza by the Israelis, he said, the Palestinians are human animals and we must eradicate them. And that view has become quite widespread, at least in practice, in the minds of people in Western Europe, multiplied and exacerbated by the campaign in the mass media to present this as an equal conflict. Hamas doesn't have an army, Hamas doesn't have a navy, Hamas doesn't have an air force, Hamas doesn't have the weaponry. Israel has got the weaponry, it's backed by America, it's backed by Europe, and it's backed by Britain. With your money is used to blow those people up. Your taxes are used to blow those people up. So when they talk, all their humanitarian rights in Ukraine, the freedom of the Ukrainians. And there was a time when they were all going on about the Uyghurs in China. Oh yeah, but what about the Uyghurs? They're all in prison in China. When they blow up the Palestinians on a daily basis, it's like accident. The Israelis have admitted they accidentally accidentally blew up a load of ambulances, accidentally blew up thousands of children, accidentally blew up a school. That's the arguments these people are making. And people are sucking it in through, but it's the same propaganda and mass media lies that they were telling during COVID. You know, you're supposed to believe all the nonsense they say then. Line up this way, stand in a line, stand 2 meters apart, wear a mask, be wary of your neighbour, go for your vaccination. Like a bunch of guinea pigs. But even guinea pigs, you don't stand 2 meters apart. You can never train an animal to do what they did to us. You couldn't train any dog to do what they did to us. But I remember, disease, that was the disease. No, but you're not getting it. That was the disease. The disease was the mental attitude that your neighbour is your enemy.
What about the actual disease which killed people?
Well, there was a trial.
My granddad died of COVID last year.
Known as the Challenge Trial, carried out by Imperial College. 36 healthy young people like yourself, 36 young people like yourself were taken to Imperial College in laboratory conditions, and they dropped in SARS-CoV-2 into the nasal passage. Both nasal passages, closed it for 10 minutes. Then they checked. They did PCR test. They did lateral flow test. Half of them, even though they've been deliberately had this dropped into their nasal passage, half of them showed no detectable presence of SARS-CoV-2. One. So 50% of people were immune to even the appearance of SARS-CoV-2 in their bodies. Second, coronaviruses are not new. There are 4 common coronaviruses that were identified since the 1960s. Every child, by the time they're 15, has had what's called an infection with a coronavirus, with one of the 4 or all 4 of the coronaviruses. The coronaviruses all look the same. They have this ball with the spikes on the outside. That's what the corona is. It's a crown. It doesn't matter. Let's deal with it first of all as people understand it. Then we can get on to the other questions that you're concerned with. Now, the crown is what the body is immune against, because once you've been infected with one coronavirus, you are immune to the next one. Immunity means your body is protected. It will not die. It does not mean you won't come ill. Every couple of years you get flu, you get cold, you haven't eaten enough, you've been out late at night, you've been strained, some stress in the family, you're not very well for one reason or another, and then you catch a flu or you get a coronavirus, you come down sniffy for a couple of days, you got a temperature, maybe you got a week of illness, and then you recover. There is a phrase, an idiom, a well-known idiom that has a lot of logic to it. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It is the foundation. It is the foundation of immunity. That's the foundation in popular consciousness of immunity. Once you have one type of illness, you are pretty much immune for quite a long period of time. We know how this functionally operates through the T-cell memory of it held in the lymph nodes and the spleen and in the bloodstream that protects you against past infections, recognizes similar infections and protects you against them by killing the infected cells. That, by the way, is also true of cancer. Cancer is also present in every one of you. So when they tell, oh my God, pre-cancerous cells. Everybody's got precancerous cells in their body. From the moment they're born, they've got precancerous cells. Your body, however, can recognize them and kill them. That's the ability of the body to protect itself. Until, for one other reason, your body is weakened and then you become susceptible to an expansion of the cancer. By the way, there is a great deal of evidence been forthcoming over the last 2 years that the Pfizer jabs, the mRNA vaccines, accelerate certain types of cancer. There's a lot of studies on that been published in the last 2 years by peer-reviewed academic journals, as they like to say. But you remember they used to, that's why I said what I said. You remember they said to you, oh yes, but are you a doctor? I saw this thing the other day. Someone says, I am a doctor, but I'm not medical. But medical doesn't mean anything. Medical first is below a doctor. It's a medical doctor. It's an MD, they say. And it means you've received a certain training. Like a plumber receives training to do plumbing. A medical doctor receives training about the body and about medicines and about the, anatomy and stuff like that. 3-4 years of training, which can be very useful for certain types of illnesses. But then it is also true, and of course the government's been playing on this in a mistaken way, it is also true that there is a massive over-medicalisation of illnesses. Over-medicalisation. So a lot of people, they receive cocktails of drugs. Cocktails of drugs. By the time they're 60, they're taking like 10 pills a day. They've never done studies on the interaction between all these pills and then the interaction between all those pills and people. Not as many as you. I should be taking. How many should I be taking is the question. And then they showed that around the third largest killer in the Western world is medical drugs. Officially prescribed medical drugs. The third largest killer. It may well be higher. It may well be higher. So these lies that they tell at every level in society, the COVID thing was the extremity of it, where they pushed it into our everyday lives at such a level that it affected how everyone behaved to everyone else. That was the most extreme form. And now we've got the external, the reason why people don't complain about Gaza and Ukraine is because it was the externalization. We had the internal COVID problem, which ended with the rise of the Ukraine war and then the rise of Gaza. And they seem to be, it's over there. And the way it manifests itself is that, we're free now to do what we like. But of course, later, the same methods they're using in Gaza and Ukraine will be used against you. That's the point I'm making. And Donald Trump is no freedom fighter. He's a fighter for an autocracy. He's a fighter for a plutocracy, as you said, correct me. He's a fighter for the elite and the oligarchy who want to overthrow the government of China and establish an American-style colonized state in China that would serve the... Then they'd suddenly take the tariffs away. If the Chinese was a pliant government, they'd say, okay, no tariffs, no problem. Export all you can if our companies are able to... And of course, the proof of the pudding is that it's exactly what they've done. Donald Trump said, massive tariffs on China, except on computers and mobile phones. Why? Because they're American mobile phones and American computers. That's why. Manufactured in China. Who's going to manage? The Chinese will do fine. The Americans will have big problems. There's no doubt about it. The Chinese will do fine. The Chinese won't be affected by this because actually over many years the China was exporting its goods to America, making a couple of American dollars and then putting the money in the US treasuries. They don't have to do that. If people are prepared to buy in yuan and the Chinese receive yuan for their payments and people can buy from them, then they can create an alternative balance of power in the world economy.
Suspended for 90 days or that
I think that's, I don't know, I didn't follow that. One final question.
You were talking about the cancer being in us from the start, and you said there was a you talking about
turbo cancer, yeah.
You're talking about parasites. Because they're saying now that cancer are actually cancerous parasites and some kind of fungal infections and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know enough to make a comment, so I won't. But I know there was a lot of discussion recently.
Right out on a limb.
I don't know. I don't know enough to make an informed comment on that. I'll study that one day, but that's for another day when I've got a bit of time. Yeah. Okay, ladies and gents, I've been speaking for a while. Thanks very much.
Heiko, Khoo!